When Jesus arrives in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, he's already got many, many followers. There were 12 people who were particularly close to Jesus, and they are called his disciples. So Jesus gets ready and he's entering Jerusalem by one of the entrance points. At the same time, someone else is entering Jerusalem at another point. His name is Pontius Pilate. He is a Roman governor and he rules over Jerusalem. When he enters, he comes in on a giant war horse and he has his fine uniform on and he's up high, strong, riding in. People look up to Pontius Pilate. Some people even fear Pontius Pilate. When Jesus arrived in Jerusalem, he was very different. He was on a donkey and he was down quite low. So as he rode past on the donkey, he was able to make eye contact with the people. And he just had a plain tunic on and sandals. Such a difference from Pontius Pilate. It makes me wonder, what sort of king would Jesus be? The people were delighted to see Jesus and they waved their palm branches in the air. Some even took off their cloaks and placed them on the ground for Jesus to ride upon. They were so full of praise and joy. Finally, the one that God had promised had arrived, and they shouted, "Hosanna! Hosanna!" Hosanna is a term full of praise and joy, but it also means save us. So they were delighted that Jesus had come to save them. That makes me wonder, what sort of king did the people think Jesus would be? So Jesus and his disciples had went to Jerusalem and people from all over had gathered to be in Jerusalem for this very special time of year. People from all over came to worship God and to give thanks to God and to remember all that God has done for them. When they saw Jesus riding on a donkey, they were just full of joy. There was such buzz in the air, such excitement. Finally, the one who has come to save us has finally arrived. Can you imagine it? Such joy as they waved their palm branches, such adoration as they placed their cloaks on the ground for Jesus to ride upon. So what happens as the week moves on? On Monday, Jesus makes his way to the temple. This is the place that everybody would go to worship God. It was huge and there were spaces for everyone. So Jesus went there, and when he got there, he was so angry. They had made it into a common marketplace. They were selling doves and selling other things, and the money was stacked on the table. And more than that, they were doing this in the outer courts, the places where the people who had travelled from all over came to worship God. The very special place for those people who did not live in Jerusalem. So they were stopping people from coming to worship God. And Jesus pulled some cords and he cracked on the ground and he said, "Be away with you. You have turned this place into a den of robbers." And he pushed them out and he turned over the money changer tables and the money went everywhere, animals running wild. Well, that upset the people a bit, didn't it? The people, the religious leaders who were at the top and organising it all, said that it could happen and were making lots of money from it. Jesus told the religious leaders, "Shame on you, shame on you. You go about and you look for the people to look up to you because of how you behave, how you look. You may be clean on the outside, but on the inside, you are like a dirty cup. Looking at the people around you and more concerned about how you look rather than looking inside into your heart. Shame on you. Shame on you. Your hearts should be full of love. Love to look after the people, especially the people who need it the most. Those who are widows, those who are orphans, and those who are poor. But you do not. You make it difficult for them. You should love God and you should love the people, but you do not do either of them. Wow. I wonder what the religious leaders were thinking now. I wonder what they thought of Jesus. Jesus would sit by the stairs of the temple and tell stories to the people. But these weren't just stories for entertainment. These were stories with meaning. So Jesus shared the stories and he taught the people. He shared a few stories, but the people weren't really sure what Jesus was talking about. They were trying to understand. In one of his stories, he spoke about a father who owned a vineyard and about the father's son who was killed by the people. Whatever did Jesus mean? Whatever was he talking about? The religious leaders were looking for an opportunity to arrest Jesus. He was getting more and more popular. More and more people were following him. But more than that, he was putting their position at risk. He was challenging them. And now the people were looking at them in a different way. So they looked for an opportunity when they could get Jesus, but they didn't want to do it when there was lots of crowds around, in fear that a riot would break out and there would be violence that they could not control. So they waited, and then an opportunity came. Judas, who was one of Jesus's 12 disciples, went to the religious leaders and he said, "How much will you give me if I betray Jesus to you?" They said, 30 pieces of silver. Judas thought about it and then said, "Yeah, okay." So Judas took the 30 pieces of silver and told them where they would be able to find Jesus when all the crowds were not present. I wonder, why did Judas betray Jesus? I also wonder, what is going to happen to Jesus? So on a Thursday, they were all getting ready for a very special meal. Jesus and his disciples went to the upper room. And as they entered, Jesus did something that was a little bit strange. He had never done this before, but he took a towel and put it round his waist, and then he poured out some water and he washed all the feet of every disciple. Now, they lived in a very hot place, and back then the ground was full of sand and dirt, and they all wore open-toe sandals. So it was a dirty, smelly job. It wasn't a nice job. And Jesus said, "I have set you an example. Do to others as I have done to you." So Jesus was saying, you are to look after one another and other people. You are to serve one another and other people. Jesus was telling them that they should love one another. So once their feet had been washed, they sat down for the meal. Now this was a very special meal. This was a meal that everybody who had gathered together to be worshipping God would be sitting down to on that Thursday. It was something they did every single year. And they did it to remember a time back in history when God saved his people, when God rescued his people from slavery. So as they were sitting down at the meal and retelling all that God had done, everything was going as usual. And then Jesus did something different. He took the breads and he gave thanks to God. Jesus had done that all the time. But the next bit, that was a strange bit. Jesus broke the bread and he said to all of his disciples, "This is my body broken for you. Take Eat. Whatever did Jesus mean? This is my body broken for you. And then he took the red wine and he poured it out into a cup. And he said, this is my blood poured out for you. Take and drink. Do this and remember me. This is a new promise. Whatever did Jesus mean? This is a new promise? And then Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many rooms, and I am going there to prepare a place for you. What did Jesus mean? Where was this place that Jesus was going to prepare? Then, after the meal, they prayed, they sang a hymn, and they went into the Garden of Gethsemane. But one disciple wasn't there. Judas had slipped out in the middle of the meal. I wonder what happens in the garden. In the Garden of Gethsemane on the Thursday night, Jesus prayed. Jesus knew what was just about to happen, and he was in so much distress. He could have chose to leave the garden, but he chose to stay. And then, in the distance, some people arrive with fire torches. The disciples of Jesus have seen them coming, and Jesus knows that this is the time. They approach him, and in the distance, he recognizes Judas. The disciples were gathered round Jesus, and the religious leaders and the soldiers with their torches came closer and closer. And then Judas leant over and gave Jesus a kiss on the side of the cheek. And that was how he let the people know that this is the one you have been looking for. This is Jesus. Well, at that, a fight broke out. The disciples pulled out their swords and they were sword fighting. And one servant even got his ear cut off in the violence. And Jesus said, stop, stop, stop this violence. This is not the way. So the disciples placed their swords to the side, and then the soldiers took the hands of Jesus and bound them, and Jesus was led away, and Jesus went off into the darkness of Thursday night.